So Dr. Lalit Verma has the next talk. He'll be talking about on vitrectomy in PCV.
Thank you, sir, and thanks to the organizers of this third midterm AIUS and LOC for these wonderful arrangements. I'll be talking about an entity which is assuming more importance because of recognition, because PCV is a fairly common diagnosis in Asia. And one of the issues with PCV is submacular hemorrhage. Submacular hemorrhage can occur in a lot of other conditions like ARMD, macroaneurysm, trauma, but PCV is one thing which I'll be talking about now. So at the outset, macular hemorrhage for a general ophthalmologist needs to be differentiated whether it's a subhyaloid or a subretinal. Because in contrast to subhyaloid, the subretinal is an emergency, is one of the ophthalmic emergencies. We can't leave this patient. Whereas subhyaloid, you can easily watch or do or laser or maybe surgery also. And the natural course of subretinal hemorrhage is generally poor because of multiple factors, toxicity of iron and clot retraction and even a mechanical barrier also. But if it is subfoveal, it causes profound visual loss because of the same reasons and that is the reason we want to treat it on a war footing. We can't leave it because of, irreversible damage to the retinal photoreceptors. Remember, this blood is amongst the rods and cones. And what happens if the blood is amongst the rods and cones? If it retracts, the rods and cones may be destroyed also. So I'll describing a couple of scenarios of this. This is what I call a mild kind of subretinal hemorrhage. Although it is involving fovea, you do the imaging technique, and we gave only intraocular anti-VEGF injection only, and patient responds reasonably good. So this is the pre and post-op fundus picture as well as the OCTs of the same. This is another patient who had a relatively smaller submacular hemorrhage, vision down to 636, and OCT shows classical subretinal hemorrhage. And you give one injection and another two injections, patient becomes reasonably good, macular hemorrhage resolves, OCT picture also improves, and vision also improves. Another example of same small submacular hemorrhage, you see OCT, there is a big RPED showing evidence of IPCV and a submacular hemorrhage with some fluid also. With one shot, patient has improved quite a bit, and ultimately patient gained 6/24 from 6/60 and good resolution on OCT also. Scenario number 2 is that you have a relatively bigger or larger subretinal hemorrhage, which may be thicker also. Some people measure thickness also. This, if you treat, to my experience, this patient does not generally respond to only injections. So do not waste time in giving only injections. So these patients, I insist on under topical anesthesia only, you do a pneumodisplacement. You inject C3F8 gas and also an anti-VEGF injection. And then position him prone for some time. And then you see this patient generally migrates because the blood gets shifted from the important area to an unimportant area. What was there in the central part, now it has shifted to an unimportant area. So that is what this pneumo does, that pneumo will displace this large subretinal hemorrhage to an unimportant area. And remember, this pneumo is not the treatment. Pneumo is just a mechanical displacement. We still want to keep giving Eylea or anti-VEGF for long time. But ultimately, you have to address the cause. So this was that presentation. Then we repeated angiography as well as ICG and found some area for laser, and this we definitely lasered this area. This was another patient, large subretinal hemorrhage in the left eye, right eye, old scarring here, PCV. So again, treat this on a war footing, and after pneumodisplacement and continued treatment with aflibercept, this patient did pretty good. And this was the serial OCTs. If you see from down to the top, this response is pretty good, and concavity of the foveal contour has come back. So pneumodisplacement is a cost-effective technique and works very nicely in moderate amount of subretinal hemorrhage. But remember again, pneumo is only a mechanical job. You have to keep treating the cause with anti-VEGF agents. The last scenario is when you have a massive subretinal hemorrhages. Things like these again will not respond only to anti-VEGF. They will also not respond to only pneumodisplacement. So for such you require a vitreous surgery. So this was a story of one elderly lady who came with sudden loss of vision 2 days back. So we counseled her that you have to be treated today. Today means you have to be done as early as possible. So ultimately she agreed, and next day we pushed her for surgery. This was the FA and ICG which we had done, revealed a polyp. Left eye was absolutely okay. So we planned this surgery, and yeah. So this is the vitrectomy which we did for this lady. And after the core vitrectomy, as usual, you can notice the huge amount of on the entire posterior pole. There is a large subretinal hemorrhage. You inject some triamcinolone crystals to get the posterior vitreous face completely detached and take it out. This is the IVTA being injected, and then the hyaloid is picked up. And after the hyaloid is picked up, then you have this dual needle where the tip is of 41, and and then you load this RTPA, recombinant plasminogen activator. Inject generally at 2 or minimum 2 or 3 sites, because one site may not be enough because of the loculation of this blood. Because if you inject only one place, it may not respond as nicely. So there are 2 places I injected RTPA, and you see this was day 1, in fact. This was day 1. You see this has responded reasonably well. And after follow-up, I kept giving aflibercept repeatedly, even in this eye. Even though the gas was still there, we kept giving this RTPA. And foveal contour started improving. This is the final picture of this. If you see this right eye, and this is the right eye of the last follow-up. Reasonably good response to vitrectomy plus RTPA plus aflibercept. This was another patient, a medical professional who presented with sudden loss of vision. This was the picture which you could take. And on the surgery, what we found was after doing a core vitrectomy, again same steps, you inject triamcinolone for getting this hyaloid out, and then you see massive mounds of this black colored virtually subretinal hemorrhage here. So these mounds again, we took RTPA, recombinant plasminogen activator, and injected at multiple settings, multiple points. So this was one point where I injected RTPA. There are various ways of injecting. One is a mechanical. There are automated systems also available where you can inject RTPA like this. And then once you have done this, there's no need of lasering these points because they are very too small, and posterior pole normally don't require lasering these points. And then you do a fluid gas exchange. So this was day 1. And then fortunately, because the macula was very good, this patient recovered 6/9 vision from PLPR only. This is pre and post. So thus to conclude, firstly, we should definitely distinguish. All macular hemorrhages are not same. Subretinal hemorrhage require treatment of Wadsworthing. And what I believe is small subretinal hemorrhages will respond very nicely to only anti-VEGF. A moderate degree or slightly thinner hemorrhages require pneumodisplacement plus continued treatment with anti-VEGF. And a massive subretinal hemorrhage requires intervention with the vitrectomy plus subretinal TPA plus gas injection plus continued anti-VEGF treatment. Thank you very much for your patient listening.
Thank you, Dr. Lalit Verma, for extensive management options. Any questions? Dr. Malika.
So very good slides. What is the, do you use intravitreal TPA when you are giving intravitreal anti-VEGF?
Yeah, we used to use, in the second category, sometimes we used to use intravitreal TPA, but I did not find any difference between 2 groups. One was only gas and anti-VEGF, the second was gas plus intravitreal TPA plus injection.
Yeah, there's no definite studies to show the benefits. So each of us has to just see what we can find. Personally, I found some benefit. Even in the same patient, 2 eyes in one eye did not give, one eye gave, and there was a difference. But that may be coincidence. Do you look for sub-RPE hemorrhage on the OCT before you go for surgery? If it's sub-RPE, probably you would not operate.
Yes, yes, correct. That I should have pointed out, but sir, sub-RP carries the worst kind of prognosis. There you cannot, because you can't puncture the RP and get the blood out of it. These patients do not respond. Sometimes I've seen sub-RP may get displaced by gas only, may get displaced, but generally not. Generally prognosis is worse in such cases. And you're right that pre-op OCT, both these patients I could not do because of the vitreous hemorrhage already being there. But I have pictures where if the media is clear, you should get some information on OCT, whether it is subretinal or sub-RPE.
Yeah. And
Or sometimes sub-ILM, sometimes sub-ILM also.
yes.
Yeah.
Then again, that's not harmful, so
Yeah.
harmful.
Yeah, sub-ILM is not harmful at all. My basic aim of presentation was to recognize this an ocular emergency and treat it on a war footing.
That's true. And most of the time, even if media is clear, it's before going for surgery or even pneumo displacement, it's better to do a B scan because afterwards there may be a breakthrough hemorrhage and you're not able to do OCT to see how the macula is behaving. But if you have a pre-op B scan, you can compare the resolution with the B scan. I've had that problem,
Correct,
especially with massive hemorrhages. They come into the vitreous.
correct.
And sometimes the fluid, the heme may not be maximum at the foveal center, but just above it or below it. Now if we do a prone positioning, we bring most of the blood into the center. So
In any case, if it is that, I may not go inside. I may not go inside. Because if the media is clear, there is no vitreous hemorrhage, but there is a heme, say nasally, massive heme also, or sparing the fovea,
but
generally
you're
I
not
will
sparing
not.
the fovea, it is in the fovea, you want to salvage the fovea also, then you would probably during surgery remove the blood rather than leave it in with TPA gas. You would actually put TPA, allow it to liquefy and then take it out so that your foveal center is spared.
The only issue with such, I have done it, but requires multiple retinotomies. It does not come away with one retinotomy. Does not. Yes.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Can you? You see, this could be a suprachoroidal kind of blood. Maybe you can drain externally sometimes. Sometimes you can drain externally these hemorrhages. But going in a phakic eye, if it is just behind the lens, it is actually very risky, or you may have to sacrifice the lens. You can try doing external drainage in such patients. And maybe along with some AC maintainer, or so that you have to have internal pressure which has to be raised, then only this blood may come out. Or that is the only way. But suprachoroidal, we have definitely drained like this, even with trocar cannula if you insert, and the other trocar cannula to raise the pressure. This just comes out with a routine trocar cannula also. If it is subretinal, it is difficult. Subretinal, it is actually difficult. Anybody has any other, comment on this?
So very good cases, sir. So I had a couple of comments that there are studies which have shown that intravitreal versus subretinal TPA, there's not much difference being shown in the results. So they say that you don't really need to go subretinal, even injecting in the.
So you see, I agree with you. I also used to maintain that. But in very large subretinal hemorrhages, what I found is I did try, intravitreal route. This generally does not help. My results with intravitreal TPA versus without intravitreal TPA with pneumo procedure were equally the same. Pneumo did the same job as intravitreal TPA. So therefore, I showed these 2-3 videos where we have injected subretinal, and there is a so-called guaranteed benefit. It will come. It will come. Whereas intravitreal, you still pray to God that it may come.
Some surgeons, they also use air. Do
Yes.
you use air, sir?
Yeah, I have not tried, but I know about this, and a lot of people say in the recent, meeting a couple of months back, I saw that they say low-cost solution is you forget about RTPA, you inject only air. That also may work. And people injected subretinal anti-VEGF also.
Anti-VEGF.
Anti-VEGF also.
Yes. Last question. In these cases, if there's no view, like you showed some cases where there's vitreous hemorrhage, so often the predicament is that in that age group, sometimes you suspect a mass lesion, and it's very difficult to really conclusively say that whether there's any mass lesion, and or if the fellow eye is fairly normal, how do you, are there any telltale signs to say that this is a subretinal hemorrhage and not a mass lesion in that age group, in about 80-85 years age group?
That is what I think Malika also says. A pre-op ultrasound may help you because of the characteristics of ultrasound. If you have measurement of angle kappa also and see the reflectivity behavior of the contents of the mass, then you can talk to the patient that this is a huge elevation here. This could turn out not to be hemorrhage and could be something else. Apart from a systemic workup and other pointers which may sometimes tell you, but you can be surprised during table also. You
And
can
MRI doesn't help, sir, because they are unable to, differentiate
differentiate.
between. Yes.
Correct. Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
You see, I had one patient I did not show a huge elevation. Ultimately, we had to do a retinectomy to, but take it out.
Dr. Ajay, only one question because we are running out of
Just
time.
The answer to what he asked was a bullous
Yeah, yeah.
this thing, and as sir just suggested, I've done one case, and I think Manish presented a patient where he did a large relaxing retinotomy, reflected the retina, removed the blood.
Yeah.
and that was-
That's, you see, whenever you do retinectomy, large, believe me, long-term results are never good. It shows very nicely. Video shown is very good. But long-term, if you follow up for a couple of years, these patients don't do well. Therefore, I was telling that you can do an external this thing if possible, so as to only thing to maneuver your instruments inside the eye. That's all.
Yeah.
But not as the main.
Another thing, just a suggestion, sir. I have a beautiful video where you were injecting with a 41 gauge needle or a 39 gauge needle. I just presented yesterday a device which is foot controlled, because whenever
Yes.
you inject subretinally, there are some hand movements. With that device, there is no hand movements. So you can inject it
I did mention that you can do an automated thing.
Yeah, so-
automated.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Lalit.
Thank you.